A Reminder of You. Written by Just Thinking Drabbles. Read by Rashi. It is not the sight of snowfall that reminds Ferdinand of Embarr, but the sight of children playing in it. He glances out the window briefly at them, and sighs as he is reminded of a time long past, when he, Hubert, and Edelgard were younger, and would enjoy playing out in what little snow they did get. He would start snowball fights with them, much to Edelgard's delight and Hubert's annoyance, and they would play out in it for hours, until they couldn't stand it any more. They were happier days, before the war, before he left the Black Eagles, before he and Hubert. He quickly turned away, pained by the hauntings that still followed him 3 years into the war. He hurried down the hall to meet his boyfriend Sylvain for tea. He hadn't seen him in several weeks, since he had been sent out on a mission against some of Edelgard's forces, and Ferdinand had missed him dearly. When he entered his bedchambers, he found Sylvain already there, and he smiled to himself, delighted to see him so casually dressed. He had laid his coat on the back of the divan, and had already undone the 2 top buttons of his shirt. His hair was a beautiful mess of waves that Ferdinand had dreamt about running his fingers through, and his cheeks, tinted a light shade of red from the warmth of the fire, were illuminated by the dim lighting, creating a soft glow across the freckles dappled there. Ferdinand felt the urge to kiss every one of them overcome him. He cleared his throat to announce his presence, and Sylvain looked up from his place by the flames, a dazzling grin filling his face when his eyes met his. He stood and set the poker down as he approached Ferdinand, the gap between them bridging immediately, as he wrapped his arms around his waist and kissed him. Ferdinand hummed happily and allowed his body to melt into his touch as he brought his arms around Sylvain's neck. "I missed you," said Sylvain, when their lips eventually parted. Ferdinand brought his fingers through his hair, the sensation of the soft locks within his fingers just as wonderful as he remembered them to be. It grounded him and allowed him to finally feel at ease, knowing his love was safe with him again. "I missed you too, dear." He gave him another kiss, this one on the nose, and Sylvain chuckled softly. He took Ferdinand's hand in his and led him to a small table he had set up near the window, one already filled with his favorite tea and an assortment of treats for them to enjoy. Yet, seeing the snow again filled his heart with a reminiscent ache once more. The last time the weather had been like this was during their time in the academy, just before the war, and try as he might, he could not forget how they had spent that day, or, rather, who he had spent the day with. Hubert hated the cold, and so they had stayed inside, wrapped in blankets, as they lazily kissed one another while the storm raged outside. To stay warm, Hubert had insisted, and though Ferdinand had known it was not the reason, he readily complied. Goddess, would that he could stop seeing him in every little thing he saw or did. "Everything all right, Ferdy?" Sylvain asked, with a raise of the brow, as he sat across from him, and began to pour them some tea. His voice startled him a bit, and he unintentionally jumped in his chair when he heard it. He clenched at his teacup as he lifted it to his face, allowing the scent of southern fruit blend to wash over him and clear his mind. "I am fine, just a little tired," he replied, after he took a sip of his tea. Sylvain seemed unconvinced, however, and took his hand in his, slowly rubbing circles into the back of it. "I know you, love, and I know when something is troubling you. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'm happy to listen if you do." Ferdinand was silent for a moment, as he stared at his reflection within the tea. Why was his mind unable to leave what had happened in the past? He had loved Hubert once, and part of him would always care for him, but they wanted different things, and he could not follow where he wanted to lead them. Besides, he was with Sylvain now, and he loved him so very much. "I have just been thinking too much recently." Sylvain gave his hand a light squeeze. "Yeah? What about?" "The snow. It reminds me of things. Of certain people. Oh. There was no need to elaborate on who. Sylvain knew. He had been the one to find him after he had left the Black Eagles, and he and Hubert had parted ways. He held him when he was crying and stayed by his side to comfort him. Do you regret it? Choosing to join the Blue Lions, I mean. What? Ferdinand's head shot up from their gaze on his cup. It's okay. I'd understand if you did. They were your friends, after all. It must be hard to go against them. He took Sylvain's hand in both of his and placed a soft kiss to the back. I won't deny that it is hard, but I do not regret it. I love you, and I am happy to be by your side, Syl. Truly? Ferdinand nodded. Truly. It still makes me sad to fight against them, of course. But if I have you by my side, then I know everything will be all right. Yes, together we can get through this. He leaned across the table and gave him another kiss, a gesture Ferdinand happily welcomed. I know it won't be much, but I got you a gift that might cheer you up. You did? That is thoughtful. You didn't have to, though. I wanted to, Sylvain replied with a wink, and left the table to retrieve the gift. Ferdinand looked out the window once again, gazing at the snowfall, and he wondered if there would ever be a time when he didn't think upon what once was. Perhaps the only remedy for it all was to create new memories, once with Sylvain by his side, and, well, spending more winters like this with him, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and enjoying his company over a cup of tea, was indeed a lovely thought.